The September 6, 2022 Council Workshop, Council of the Day received a report that introduced the project and some preliminary research and applicable policies that might help inform how the new parking bylaw will be approached. Staff retained Evolve Traffic Solutions, a parking consulting firm, to help provide guidance on current parking trends and approaches that would be suitable for Maple Ridge. The Transportation Advisory Committee and the Municipal Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusiveness were engaged in a semi-structured activities to provide high-level direction on several topics related to off-street parking. And then at the July 25th, 2023 Council Workshop, the information from Evolve Traffic Solutions and information from the advisory committees were put into a report to Council, as well as the proposed approaches based off of those recommendations on how to move forward with the new parking bylaw. So in terms of a quick recap about what we know about vehicle use today, from the data collected from our strategic transportation plan, we do know that Maple Ridge has a higher regional average of vehicle use. About 90% of daily trips are made by motor vehicles by Maple Ridge, and 86% of daily trips actually originate in Maple Ridge, stay within the boundaries. So there's quite an opportunity there to encourage more modes of transportation. In 2021/2022, the Spark PC processed around 4,000 accessible parking permits. So we know approximately 5% of people in Maple Ridge participate in that program. And then in 2002, the Metro Vancouver parking study found that there was an approximately oversupply of parking between 18 and 35%. And this was studied between 80 apartment sites, including Maple Ridge. The 2018 more recent parking study found similar results, but going up to 42% of oversupply. So the report is structured to kind of support or speak to Council's priorities and how the some parking changes, some of the larger parking changes might speak to Council's priorities. So the first one is supporting reduction of greenhouse gases. And I'm just going to run through high level. So reducing a minimum number of parking spaces for market apartment dwelling units within the town center. So going from, it should say 1.2 for a 3-bedroom apartment down to 1.0 spaces per dwelling. That's in the town center for market apartments. In the low heat transit corridor for market apartments, going from 1.5 spaces to 1.2. So that's kind of starting off that baseline of approximately 20% reduction. Permitting an additional 5% reduction for off-street parking requirements when a car share program is introduced, such as in a multi-unit residential building. So that's introducing EVO or MOTO for residents to use. And expanding the payment in lieu area to include all of the town center and the low heat transit corridor area. Requiring a minimum of 0.1 or 1.0 vehicle parking spaces to be energized, which means to have an outlet for single detached accessory dwelling units, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, courtyards, and townhouses. Requiring a minimum of 30% of vehicle parking spaces for all apartments and mixed use residential to be energized, so to have an outlet, and for the remaining units to be to have the rough-in requirements. Expanding the percentage that can be built to a small car dimension, so going from 10% to 25%, requiring 10% of each non-residential development to be fully energized, so looking at that charging head. And then requiring a minimum of 1 pedestrian walkway, including landscaping for parking areas that have over 40 contiguous spaces. In terms of supporting housing choice, for the town center, looking at further reductions for non-market and rental apartments. So going from 1.2 spaces down to 0.8 spaces. We're not going to regulate by bedroom anymore, just doing a flat rate. Reducing the minimum number of parking spaces for non-market and rental. So if they're doing the combo, looking at a reduction from 1.2 down to 0.6. So you're getting closer to a 50% reduction there. For the low heat transit corridor, reducing the minimum number of parking spaces for non-market or rental from 1.5 down to 1 space per dwelling unit. And if they're looking to provide for non-market rental apartments, so combining both, going from 1.5 down to 0.8 spaces per dwelling unit. Additionally, expanding the tandem parking requirements to allow 30% of triplex, fourplex, courtyard, and townhouse units outside of the town center to have tandem parking. So if there's a triplex, the maximum is have 30%, so only one unit within the triplex could have tandem parking. Allowing up to 50% for triplex, fourplex, courtyard, and townhouse units within the town center and low heat transit corridor area to have tandem. Council may remember from the last report in July, the percentage was suggested of 75, and council voiced some concerns, so staff have lowered it to 50%. In terms of supporting accessibility and inclusion, there's quite a long list. Lowering the thresholds for when an accessible space is required, introducing van accessible dimensions and requirements, and requiring a 1.5 meter access aisle between each accessible space. It can be shared. Providing one passenger loading space in residential buildings of 50 dwelling units or more. So mainly looking at apartments. Increasing the width of the standard car parking dimensions from 2.5 meters wide to 2.6 meters wide. Introducing lighting requirements for shared surface parking and underground parking, and updating signage requirements for visitor accessible EV and assigned parking. To help support active transportation, requiring at least one bicycle space per dwelling unit throughout the city. Council may remember we only have bicycle requirements in the town center, specifically the central business district right now. Requiring short-term bicycle parking at commercial, industrial, institutional buildings citywide, and requiring long-term bicycle spaces to be secured, illuminated, adjacent to main entrances and elevators, just to make it more comfortable for bicycle users. And then requiring accessible scooter parking for senior independent living and assisted living buildings. So the graph here on the screen just kind of shows the progress that we're here presenting the bylaw to committee of the whole. Should council grant first reading next week, the bylaw would get sent out to referral to the Urban Design or Urban Development Institute, UDI, Home Builders Association, Vancouver, Maple Ridge, Climate Hub, Hub Cycling for comment, as well as be posted on our website. Comments from these organizations would be included in the next report, and the bylaw to if there's any amendments at the time, those amendments would be brought forward, as well as, because we're doing this update, we'll have to bring forward bylaw amendments to the zoning bylaw and any applicable policies just to make sure everything's in line. So staff, council will be seeing another bylaw to complement to this bylaw at a future date. Next slide. And the recommendation is here on the screen. Should council forward it to the next regular council meeting, and it's just to grant first reading for the new off-street parking and loading bylaw, and for staff to bring forward any necessary bylaws and policy amendments in order to align with this new bylaw. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the presentation. May I have a motion to move this forward, please? Councillor Yusuf, followed by Councillor Sheila. Comments, please. Councillor Yusuf, followed by Councillor Tan, and of course, Sheila. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to staff for the presentation and report. Just a few quick questions, if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. When we're looking at the table of the proposed new bylaw versus the current bylaw, especially focusing on the farm industrial component of it, just real quick, is this the provincial standard, or would we be looking at possibly, since this is a much more labor intensive industry, of increasing the parking allotments?
So through the chair, agricultural parking requirements were introduced because it was identified as a gap. And so when we were doing our refresh, it was something to consider as other municipalities across the province are refreshing their parking bylaws. So the minimums that are in the bylaw today reflect that balance between the intensiveness of some farm agricultural uses, but also balancing the preservation of agricultural land. And so that's how we came to the ratios presented today.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. Secondly, through you, Mr. Chair, just the page before then, when we're looking at the dimensions of standard vehicle parking spaces, when looking at the average vehicle length, it's anywhere between 4.5 meters all the way up to 6 meters. Here we're seeing that there will be an increase in the width from 2.5 to 2.6 meters. However, the length of the vehicle has not been increased. And if I may, Mr. Chair, just share briefly with yourself, council and staff, that, for example, when we're looking at the Ford Lightning, not to plug a particular make of a vehicle, but it is a pickup truck, seems to be the preferred vehicle of our residents, and it's electric, thereby striking that balance. That vehicle is at 5.8 meters long. So looking at the 5.5 meters of length, do staff have the ability, or can we, up until this point, adjust or amend the length of the vehicle space to accommodate that? Sorry, it's a long-winded question with a comment built into it.
Through the
Go ahead.
chair. So as mentioned, the width was adjusted in order to accommodate the well-documented change in vehicle size. Width has grown larger than length, and the 5.5, not increasing it to 6 meters, was suggested in order to, one, help encourage smaller vehicles, reducing greenhouse gases, but it still accommodated the vast majority of vehicles on the market today. But if council was interested in us doing some more research and adjusting that, staff are happy to do so.
Thank you for that. Lastly, Mr. Chair, through you to staff, do we have any data on the utility of garage spaces side by side versus tandem? Ultimately, the question that I'm trying to answer is, which is more likely to be used for vehicle storage, tandem versus side by side?
Through the chair, in terms of likelihood, we don't have that exact data, but we do know the size of the garage correlates more closely to the use of the. Okay. Thanks.
Yes, through the chair, members of council, thank you for the opportunity. Typical tandem parking spaces were originally designed to be about 3.2 meters in width. And that was really to accommodate what you see in a lot of parking stalls. But what we realized is it's the use of a tandem. Ours is, I think, 3.6 meters inside drywall. So it's really about the utilization of that space. Can you fit your garbage cans in there? Do you have a little bit of room for storage and facilities? A lot of conversations we have with the community is, once the hockey bag is no longer stored in the garage and it's in the living room, people have a conversation about potentially moving. So we do see a lot of value in that space. And that's why our dimensions for tandem parking are a little bit wider than what you typically see throughout the region.
Thank you for that clarification. Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to see if there's actual data or if it's purely anecdotal that we've been receiving when it comes to utilization of tandem versus side by side for vehicle storage, which is the purpose that it's built for rather than other uses. Thank you to staff for those clarifications. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, a lot of my questions are around the sort of openness to investment and sort of encouraging that sort of development investment in our community. So I'm just trying, so that's sort of the context of my questions. And I'm just trying to understand, I understand that cities such as Kingston and Edmonton have really took a good look at their parking minimums. Do we have any data on how that has affected sort of investment in your community or affordable housing?
So through the chair, staff have looked into Kingston and Edmonton. Kingston recently updated their bylaws, so it's a little too soon to provide any comment. I believe it was just in the last year or so. Similar to Edmonton, there's some more information coming out because it was adopted back in June, I think 2020. So from Edmonton, there is some information about developers are providing some minimum parking, but what that actually looks like hasn't been fully studied to date. Because of the 2020 date, COVID kind of changed the game a little bit. But staff are closely watching those two municipalities as well as some others to see what those impacts for reducing minimums or completely getting rid of parking minimums altogether look like.
Thank you. And through the chair, I'm just trying to figure out sort of just balancing sort of our requirements of developers here and sort of on different fronts. And I was going through the Evolve consultants report and I was hoping for sort of an understanding of sort of the cost to developers of creating each parking stall and sort of what sort of the financial responsibility on developers or the impact on them. If staff could elaborate on that.
So through the chair, in terms of building a parking space, it depends on the level of parking it's going down. So providing a surface level is less expensive than going 15 stories down. So for kind of what we see in Maple Ridge, the ballpark that we're aware of is between 50,000 to 90,000.
And that's 50,000, 90,000 per parking stall. Okay. So sort of the reason why I'm asking is I'm just trying to understand like sort of how the development community sees parking minimums and sort of like how that affects housing supply, because I'm just wanting to sort of understand like that sort of fulsome conversation in terms of sort of like the need for parking and also sort of like how that impacts the rest of it. So a little bit of a roundabout question, but I'm just sort of trying to like get this fulsome picture here.
So through the chair, parking requirements, we do know impacts the pro forma for a development. And up until under our current bylaw, we know it was likely requiring developers to build an oversupply of parking. So with the new bylaw, it more closely aligns with the demands and the research that's showing. So hopefully taking that ease off of developers to not build that oversupplies of parking, but still meet the demands of Maple Ridge in the Maple Ridge context today.
Thank you. And I just wanted to ask specifically about the specific percentages. When I ran for council, I didn't understand that. At one point, I'd be staring at parking details, but here we are. So I'm just going back to that Metro Vancouver TransLink study you mentioned. I took a quick look at what I could find from the study, and I understand that they were looking at percentages of 36% to 42% oversupply, and I understand that a lot of the reductions requiring here are sort of at the 20% mark. And so, can staff sort of walk me through sort of how we arrived at that 20% figure?
So through the chair, the 20% was considered really to be a starting point, and we heard from council back in July that it was an okay starting point. From the Metro Vancouver, it really looked at the supply when it was close to transit, whether or not it was a strata, whether or not it was non-market, whether or not it was rental, and found that if it was close to transit and it was a non-market rental, then the parking utilization there was more oversupply of parking that was being provided for those units. So that's what the Metro Vancouver found. But it was a study for 80 municipalities across Metro Vancouver. Maple Ridge was part of it. And so taking into account, that's kind of their average. So when we came to the 20%, we started by 20% in order to align more with parking demands for market, and then took a deeper reduction approach when it's close to transit, non-market, when non-market and rental housing is being provided. And so those numbers are looking closer to 40 to 50% reduction.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sheila.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to staff for this. There's a lot of information and numbers in this report. So yeah, my focus is more specifically on the residential units in the town center and the Lougheed area corridor. So I know we've had some discussion around the 20% and sort of the background on how that was developed. Are you aware of other municipalities in Metro Vancouver that are currently looking at changes, and just sort of wondering, maybe what other cities are doing on the higher end of the 20%? Just curious if other municipalities are considering more aggressive reductions.
Through the chair, many municipalities are always looking to revise their bylaws at any time. Some have recently revised their bylaws. I think City of Mission was recently City of Abbotsford, and Burnaby, I think, is close on the list. And so the thing is about the percentages, it's based off of what they were providing before and what they're providing now. So the percentages might look a little bit different, and as well as trying to read their bylaw kind of in a stacked way. So the 20% is for Maple Ridge, where it may be a little bit lower or a little bit higher for a different municipality. For example, the City of Mission required something very similar to us at 2 spaces for an apartment. And if an applicant is looking to build a non-market rental, going down to 0.5. So our numbers are similar, but the percentages look different based off of what was provided before and after.
I gotcha. Yes, thank you. Is there anything in this proposal? I understand that when proposals come forward, applicants can request a variance in terms of parking. And I believe that we have sort of a cap on variance, so like the total amount of the variance that can be requested. Can you tell me a little bit about what we have now and if there's any changes proposed under this?
So currently there's no cap on variances. It's up to council direction. In the current bylaw, the only cap is in relation to the payment in lieu. So if you're in the town center, a payment in lieu reduction of 20%, and then in the low heat transit corridor, a 15%. And that's just to provide our developed communities some guidance, but not to say that's the only reduction that they can do. They can still do the car share program, and then also provide a parking study to staff and to council in order to support any further variances from there.
Okay, thank you. So there's not a cap on the variance per se, but there is a cap on the payment in lieu portion of it. When did Maple Ridge start collecting payment in lieu for waiving parking requirements?
Through the chair, early 1990s is when the bylaw came in order to collect the payment in lieu.
Okay. And is it fair to ask you sort of what, in a general sense, those funds have been used for?
Through the chair, to maintain our parkades, the municipal parkades.
Okay. Yep. Okay. I think that's good for me for now. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sheila. Now, Councillor Duick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. So I do see that we're going to be sharing this with UDI and Haven. So my question though is, do we not have local contacts for our developers? Like how do, what if they don't get the information from UDI or Haven? How do they know that we're making these proposed changes?
Through the chair, it's something our development team has been communicating with applicants throughout the whole process. Applicants are very aware that a change is potentially coming that may affect their applications. So that's one form of communication that staff have been taking.
Okay, so and depending on what council does, will we share that with them too? So there's an opportunity for them to give direct feedback?
Through the chair, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any more? Okay. Mayor.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and just a couple of, keep the thoughts to myself. I'll have a couple of questions for you. So if I understood correctly, this is based on a 2012 study from Metro Van?
Through the chair. So that's one piece of the research. It's also informed by the 2019 Metro Van. It's informed by all of our traffic studies that we receive from developers, information on current EV charging, bike parking, studies that have been done. The 2012 is just kind of like the starting point for research.
So my question is when we're looking at all of this, I mean, if our starting point is 2012, housing was not really the crisis that it is today. When we look at how many people are coming in the next 10 years, we have to ask ourselves, how much road space do we actually have? So is there, when we were looking at these numbers, especially in the downtown core and the transit corridor, is there an opportunity to get actually a little bit more aggressive, especially when we're talking about rentals? As homeowners tend to maybe have their own vehicles, one or two, maybe they're self-employed, maybe they have trucks. We got a lot of tradespeople that work here. As renters, maybe not everybody has their own car and they're taking transit. So if we're looking to the future, because that's what this is really all about, is there an opportunity to actually be a little bit more aggressive along that transit corridor? Because if we're not, we're actually going to squeeze ourselves out. We won't have room. So how much of that was taken into consideration in coming up with these numbers?
Through the chair, for rental specifically, it was a big topic, providing within that Maple Ridge context, in knowing that from studies that rental tends to attract less car usage, especially when it's close to transit, but also providing that kind of equity lens, that knowing that Maple Ridge residents generally rely on a car at this point. Should transit increase or any other changes, that would be a great opportunity to kind of revisit the discussion, but staff are also happy to take a look at it right now.
So there is, I mean, if we forward this to first reading, there's hopefully going to be lots of opportunity to take this one step further, especially if we're targeting rentals. Because that could be incentivizing developers to go to rentals and taking advantage of all the different programs that are out there, but also bearing in mind the future of our roadways. So when we're, and this is something that as staff is working towards this, I guess that's the question, is how far can we go? How aggressive can we go along the transit corridor? That's my question. How aggressive can we go?
Through the chair, we can definitely take a revisit at rental apartments specifically to see how much further we could go in order to incentivize that type of build.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mayor Rumi. Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are sort of close, somewhat in line with what the mayor was just speaking about. I'm just trying to understand again, like sort of that fulsome picture in terms of parking minimums and how that affects investment in our community. And the reason why I'm asking is I went through the consultant study, and like the consultant didn't necessarily have a lens on sort of the things that we think about in our strategic plan. So I just really want to understand, like, given so pulling back and understanding, that we are considering step code requirements, like construction costs have gone up for developers. How does that, is parking minimums a thing that we can use to sort of leverage sort of interest in our community in terms of investment? If we drop the parking minimums, can we sort of, we are considering we just consider tenant relocation policies. I'm sort of just trying to figure out that balance here. And then just so to Councillor Dozier's point from previous council meetings, how do we incentivize development in our community? So I'm just sort of hoping for staff to sort of take a look from that front. So I think I'll just put that there for that to come back to us. The other question I had specifically was around input from the development community before first reading. I think a little bit touching on Councillor Dewick's point about, UDI and Haven are great, and we certainly have a flourishing local development community. And I mean, maybe someone can sort of enlighten me on this. My understanding is that if we pass first reading and then it goes to the committee after, there's sort of an implicit understanding or just sort of an appearance perspective that we're giving that sort of, council has already given this first reading and therefore moves on. So I would be my preference would be for that to go to the development committee before first reading. So is there procedurally an opportunity for us to do this, and not just to UDI and Haven, but also to our local development community? And as we have talked about in previous council meetings, to CHFBC, to the BC Nonprofit Housing Association, and to the Aboriginal Housing Association. So if all before this passes, I don't know procedurally, would staff speak to that?
So through the chair, council is welcome to send it back to staff, and staff can definitely circulate it to all of those organizations. With the first reading, staff are really looking for that initial nod from council that this is generally where we want to go. Just before sending it out to the development community and nonprofit and cycling and climate action to all the communities, just to get that nod from council before,
Thank you. And through the chair, I can understand sort of that. So I understand sort of wanted to cross the T's and dot the I's. Thank you for that. I think my last question is around bike parking and e-bike parking. I've looked around at sort of what's considered sort of forward thinking, progression on bike parking. And I have curiosity about whether we've considered adding requirement for parking for larger non-standard bikes, such as cargo bikes, larger bikes like that. So just to put out what I'm thinking, I've seen like a requirement for 10% of the long-term stalls to be for larger sized and non-standard bikes. And then I didn't see a requirement in the report for a minimum for e-bike charging. And I don't know if I just missed that.
So through the chair, so larger bikes were considered, but the kind of supersized cargo bikes, similar to the supersized trucks and vehicles, and are just based off of usage right now, they weren't accounted. But if council is interested in us really exploring and kind of being on that cutting edge, staff are happy to explore. And in terms of the EV bike parking, right now in the bylaw, it's kind of at the end that we require one electrical outlet per bike parking space.
Sorry, so thank you for that. So every long-term bike parking space has an electrical. Wonderful. Thank you for that. I would be interested in the larger, just speaking for myself, I'd be interested in looking at the non-standard bikes, because I know that's where some of the community is moving. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mayor Rumi, please.
Thank you. I actually skipped over one of my points. Can't read my own writing here. There was a point that mentioned lowering the threshold for handicap space. Could you explain that a little bit further? I want to make sure that we're not missing this point here.
Through the chair. So right now, in our current bylaw, there's a certain requirement, I can pull it up, for if you have a minimum number of parking spaces, then you have to have at least one accessible parking space. So we've lowered that number, I believe, to 4 spaces to require one, where I believe before it was 25 spaces in order to have one accessible space. So lowering that threshold from when an accessible space is required.
So then are we actually losing space for accessibility?
Through the chair, we're actually increasing the number of accessible spaces throughout the community.
Okay, all right. That's important. When we look at the community that we have around us, there are more people in wheelchairs, more people with mobility issues. The last thing we want is to put them at a disadvantage. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Rumi. Any more questions? Yeah, Councillor Sheila.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few more things that have sort of come up for me during this discussion. So I believe it's correct to say that, like, overall, what we're looking here is approximately a 20% reduction in the requirements. Is the proposed requirement for rentals specifically a little bit more generous?
So through the chair, the 20% mainly applies to the apartment residential use. So we haven't reduced single detached, for an example. And then the percentage reduction does get deeper, closer to the 40 to 50% when there's a non-market rental apartment being proposed.
Great, thank you. And are we familiar with any other cities in the Lower Mainland that have sort of incentivized for that kind of rental building specifically by lowering the minimums? I'm just sort of wondering what the experience of other communities is.
So through the chair, the ones that have given kind of that deeper reduction, kind of similar to ours at the 0.5 to 0.6 spaces per dwelling unit, are very recent, and not enough information has really come forward, enough applications being built to see it being applied. We know for some of the municipalities that updated their bylaw back in like 2018, 2019, that they're still seeing some oversupply, but they were kind of looking at the one space per dwelling unit for those uses. And so the municipalities that have updated more recently for those deeper reductions, it's just too soon to tell.
Okay, fair enough. And sort of totally different topic then. Just something that occurred to me was storage for micro mobility devices. Is there anything in here about that?
So through the chair, in kind of the bike parking section, there are some accessible scooter alternatives, specifically for our senior independent living and assisted living. So instead of providing an oversupply of bike parking, ensuring that there's space for accessible scooter parking for those residents.
Okay. And would that be sort of, I'm just sort of trying to picture what that exactly would that sort of be, like an enclosed locker type space that residents could access?
Through the chair, yes, there's minimum dimensions, and similar to the bike parking, in a secured area that's well lit, well managed, accessible and comfortable for our residents to access.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Any more questions? Seeing none, I want to thank you very much for the wonderful presentation and the ability to field all the questions you have fielded. So thank you again for all the effort. I appreciate that. And I'll call the questions. Those who are in support of this is unanimously carried. Thank you. Madam Clerk, may we have the next item on the agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item on the agenda is item 5.2, 2020-129 RZ, 13287 232nd Street for first and second reading official community plan amending bylaw number 7653 2020 and second reading of zone amending bylaw number 7654 2020. Staff are in attendance to present the application to council.
Thank you very much. You may now proceed, sir.
Thank you. So the subject application at 13287 232nd Street is for first and second reading of the OCP amending bylaw as previously mentioned and second reading of the zone amending bylaw on the screen. Currently, the area, including this lot, is designated conservation, and the proposed OCP amendment is to change the designation to eco clusters under the Silver Valley area plan. Current zoning is RS3 single detached rural residential, and the proposed zoning is RS1 single detached residential. The existing lot size is 1.85 acres, and 2 lots are proposed. This is a subject map just showing the property here at the intersection of 232nd and 132nd Avenue. And this is the official community context map with the Silver Valley area plan designation showing this lot and the lots to the north and all around in the immediate area as conservation. And also the Alouette River to the south, and further to the west is the agricultural land reserve. Now, you might be wondering why this is conservation. So in the late 1990s, when the background work for the Silver Valley area plan was being done, conservation areas were included in creek ravines and steep slopes and watercourse areas, but also in the background work included in floodplain areas. They captured all this floodplain area. And now
with further floodplain mapping and review by our environment staff and planning staff, seeing that that's conservation designation isn't warranted for this area. There's no inherent higher risk of flooding in this area than some other floodplain areas. And also that there's no significant environmental features here. So just a little bit of explanation because this had first reading in early 2022. This is the neighborhood context map showing the site, rural residential site in 232nd Street. It's the proposed zoning will permit future subdivision of 2 lots, with lot 1 being approximately 1 acre and access by 132nd Avenue. And lot 2 from about 0.86 acres from access from the major north-south thoroughfare of 232nd Street. And both lots meet the minimum lot size in the RS1 zone. And as there's not sewer servicing in this area and the lots are sufficiently large, there's septic fields proposed in the lots. And those are shown on the map further on in the presentation. So as noted, this OCP amendment is to change the boundaries of the conservation land use designation to permit development of the site under the eco cluster designation that allows for development within the Silver Valley area plan. As per council policy 6.31, an amending contribution of $9,200 would be applicable for the additional lot being created if the application proceeds to completion. The development variance permit application here, there's a development variance permit that's required for some servicing requirements to relax the required road dedication on the property fronting 232nd Street and the servicing requirements under the bylaw. And those have been reviewed with city engineering staff and they're in support of that. The above noted relaxation anticipated no further frontage upgrades required for 232nd Street. And if the application proceeds to completion, there would be a future council report on detailing the variances. This is a site plan here showing the proposed lots 1 and 2, lot 1 to the west with a septic field preliminary and reserve locations on it, and lot 2 to the east showing the existing house to be maintained on that site. There's a 1 accessory building, maybe 2 that have to be removed that would be on the lot line, the north-south lot line. So the recommendations in the report is that just further to the requirements of the Local Government Act for early and ongoing consultation, it's being considered to be completed with posting of information on the website, the consideration of bylaw at council meetings, and the holding of a public hearing in the future. The OCP amending bylaw must be considered in conjunction with a capital expenditure plan and waste management plan. It's confirmed that the OCP amending bylaw is consistent with the capital expenditure plan, and the waste management plan. And given that, it's recommended that the official committee plan amending bylaw be given first and second reading and forwarded to a public hearing, and that the zone amending bylaw be given second reading and forwarded to a public hearing. And then the detailed conditions, which I'll very summarily go over because they're all on the screen, is registration of a geotechnical covenant for the floodplain component, as noted previously, to establish the floodplain elevation for the building, removal of the existing accessory buildings on the proposed lot 1, the registration of septic field covenants based on the septic field reports that we've received, and confirmation that there is no hazardous materials on the site through the site disclosure statement process of the province and through the commissioning of underground fuel storage analysis to make sure there's no fuel storage tanks that are improperly located, maintained, or traversing property lines. And that ultimately, if the application proceeds to completion, as noted, there'd be a $9,200 amending contribution at time of adoption. Mr. Chair and committee.
Thank you very much, sir. May I have a motion? Councillor Yusuf, seconded by Mayor Rumi. Now, question time on comment. Councillor Yusuf, followed by Councillor Chila. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to staff for the presentation and report. 3 quick questions, if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. What flood mitigation measures would be taken for this particular subdivision as it is within the floodplain?
The primary flood measures are determined through the geotechnical report that will confirm the flood construction level so that the house, the habitable areas are built at sufficient flood construction level. And if there's any other recommendations from the geotech report, they would be incorporated into the design of the house.
Thank you for that. Secondly, through the chair to staff, when we're looking at access possibly off of 232nd and 132nd Avenue, is 232nd considered to be a major corridor in that area? And if so, do we have a policy that mitigates having driveways onto major corridors, and therefore would this access be limited to 132nd Avenue?
The proposal will have the existing house accessing 232nd Avenue as it's existing there, and then the new lot off of 132nd. The policy does not prohibit access for the one dwelling on there, as there is already one lot facing the street, 232nd Street.
That explains that. Thank you for that clarification. Lastly, through you, Mr. Chair, on the second variance that's being requested, how far is it, or how difficult is it to connect to sanitary sewer from the property?
It's some ways away, and I'll just defer to the Director of Engineering on that.
Yes, thank you. So given the lot size, staff are recommending that this would continue to be serviced by septic system. Connection to sewer would be south of the property, southeast near Maple Ridge Park would be the closest pump station. So there would likely require some additional pump station and force main to connect it into the existing system. It'd be cost prohibitive.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mayor Rumi, sir. Oh, was it not you? Okay. Councillor Sheila then. Sorry. I think I mixed it up.
Thank you. Thank you for providing some of that context around, the original or the existing conservation designation, and that it has been looked at. And I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding correctly. So you said, it is currently conservation. It's been looked at, and there is not the risk for this property to flood is similar to what exactly? Can you just clarify?
Similar to other floodplain areas throughout the city. So when this plan was done, aside from the environmentally sensitive areas, all the floodplain area, and that was captured as conservation. And so this is not inherently a more risky site than other floodplains in the Alouette River basin, or even in other basins throughout the city. And that's been confirmed with environment staff.
Okay, thank you for that. And just curious, when these properties, are sold, sort of how is the info, is information that these properties are within the floodplain, is that made clear to potential buyers in some way?
Yes, I mean, as part of, there's a real estate disclosure requirements, but also the registration of a flood covenant. That's a geotech covenant on title that's done, that establishes the flood construction level, will make it clear that there's a geotech report, because there's a flood construction requirement, and the flood construction requirement will be in that covenant on title.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Klein.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure I understand the original conservation designation. It was originally designated the conservation because of the caution around the floodplain, and that it would be within the floodplain.
Speaking to the environment staff that were here at the time, that's my understanding from that they blanket covered the floodplain in that area with a conservation designation, which wouldn't be done in a planning process now, as we have many areas that are in floodplains. The conservation designation includes other steep slopes and creek ravines and fisheries habitat, but here they just blanket covered the floodplain in that area. And that's why you would see, going all the way up 232nd for quite a large area, this conservation designation that was in the floodplain.
Thank you for that. And so is there any, so are we saying that this is not within the floodplain?
What we're saying is that staff doesn't see that the conservation designation is warranted, because the floodplain is not unusual in its characteristics. It was just it was a decision that was made in the late 1990s to include this area in floodplain, the floodplain area in conservation. So
okay, so I understand that it isn't necessarily for environmental conservation purposes that we may have designated it in the past as conservation. It was more out of concern around the floodplain.
right.
Okay, I have two questions about that. One, is this lot in the floodplain?
Yes, this lot is in one, well, we have several floodplain maps. I think it's in the 2016 floodplain maps, and that's why there'll be a geotech report regarding the floodplain. So it is. We're saying that's not, we're still saying it's in floodplain. It's just that it's not warranted to be conservation because of being in the floodplain.
I understand. Okay, so there are two separate issues, the conservation, the floodplain piece. Those are two separate issues. We're not necessarily concerned about the conservation piece, but just to understand, so we are building on the floodplain here. And
Yes.
so what mitigation are we can we be putting into place here to ensure that come flood season that this property won't experience difficulties?
So this would have, as I mentioned, the geotechnical report that is done by the engineer confirming what the flood construction level would be based on the elevation of the land and the characteristics of the area. And then that report then establishes what's called a flood construction level, FCL, of an elevation to ensure that the habitable area of any buildings is above the 200-year flood limit.
I understand. So the idea is that, or tell me if I understand that the idea is that the inhabitable folks are not living under
That's
a
right.
flood area.
Be garages, but not habitable area.
Right. And we may still experience similar challenges of access to the property during flood season.
I couldn't really say that. I mean, the flood geotech report will have some information on that, but as with other floodplain areas, which would include much of Hammond and other parts of the city and some of the agricultural areas, there will always be some challenge if there's a severe flood, but the idea is that the actual habitable dwellings are not located below the anticipated flood level.
Okay, thank you for that. I think I would be interested in more details regarding sort of the flood mitigation area to the flood related issues around that. I understand the inhabitable, I understand that we're raising the unit. My concern is just around access to the unit and what does that mean as we, experience more challenging seasons. But I'm happy to leave it there for now and have more information come back. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Yusuf. Councillor Yusuf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to staff, just real quick, when we're looking at this particular application and where it's located, what consultation will be conducted with either Ava, ARMS, or Catesy, as this is within the sensitive heritage area of the Alouette River?
Mr. Chair, through your council, wasn't any additional consultation recommended for this application.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was my question.
Thank you. Any more questions? Go ahead, Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to sort my head out around the issue we just spoke about. I'm very new to this issue. Could staff sort of give me a run through so what the policy is around construction in floodplains, both in Maple Ridge and sort of across the Lower Mainland?
Pardon, sorry.
So what is there a policy in terms of construction in the floodplain? What's the practice across, municipality and across the Lower Mainland?
So in Maple Ridge, we rely on geotechnical reports being done in mapped floodplain areas to establish the elevation and any other requirements. In some other municipalities, there are covenants. Other ones have flood construction bylaws that establish they do a larger study of the whole area of the city or portions of the city with a geotech and engineering report and geothermological reports establishing river morphology and flooding potential, and they'll establish a flood construction bylaw for the whole city or large portions of the city.
If I could just add on to that. And so those are two different approaches to get to the same answer, and it's to establish a flood construction level for new construction. And really that then entails either filling the property or designing your structure so that the habitable space is above that flood construction level. That's a consistent approach across the Metro Vancouver region. And really the difference that Mark was referring to was how we get to that flood construction level. Within the city of Maple Ridge, the current requirement is for the builder/developer to retain a geotechnical engineer to establish that level. Whereas other communities have done some of that groundwork and have established that level in advance. At the end of the day, it still leads to the same construction or filling techniques in order to meet that FCL.
You done? Thank you very much. Any more questions? Thank you very much, sir, for your presentation. And in the absence of any more questions on this, I will call the question, please. Councillor Doig, followed by Councillor Sheila. Sorry. Yes, it's voting. Actually, I'm calling for not a motion. All right, those in support of this should please show by raising their cards. Yeah, it's unanimously carried. Thank you very much again. And thank you, sir, for the presentation. Madam Clerk, may we have the next item on the agenda, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item on the agenda is item 5.3, 2021-402 RZ at 20535 123rd Avenue for second reading of zone amending bylaw number 7800 2021. Staff are in attendance to present the application to council.
Thank you. I thought you were stepping aside, but I can see you are still on. So go on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This application for 1328, this is the same application, Madam Corporate Officer.
What I have here is, you got it. Go on.
So this application at 20535 123 Avenue is being considered for second reading for zone amending bylaw 7800-2021. The area is designated, including this lot, urban residential. The proposed zone, the existing zoning is RS1 single detached residential, and the proposed zoning is R1 single detached low density urban residential. The lot is approximately 975 square meters or 10,500 square feet in size, and 2 lots are proposed. This is the subject property. This is the property on the community plan designation map showing urban residential on the lot and all around. And the subject property on the ortho photo showing the built environment around. It was noted this proposed application would permit a 2-lot subdivision with lots of approximately 160 square meters each. Consistent and quite a bit larger than the 371 square meter lot size. That's the minimum under the R1 zone. And each single family lot would have 2 off-street parking spaces as is required. And there'd be at least 1 roughed-in level 2 parking electrical charging facility on each lot. There'll also be bike parking accommodating the garage in each single family dwelling. And this application is consistent with the OCP. And if the application proceeds to completion, there'd be a $9,200 community amenity contribution applicable. This is the proposed lot layout with the 460 meter lots on each side, just accessing down to 123rd Avenue and the road dedication to widen 123rd Avenue. And the recommendations here are fairly standard for this type of application. The rezoning of restrictive covenant for the servicing agreement and the seat of the servicing security. Road dedication 123 Avenue is required. Removal of the existing building. And in addition to the site disclosure statement process that's required for rezoning, just confirmation from an engineer that there's no underground fuel storage tanks prior to adoption of the zoning, and a $9,200 community amenity contribution is just previously mentioned, Mr. Chair and committee.
Thank you very much, sir. Motion to move it on. Mayor Rumi, Councillor Yusuf. Question time. Calling for questions. And final times, question time. It looks like nobody wants to ask any question, and I will call the question now. Those who are in support of this, should please raise up their hands. It's unanimously carried again. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, may we have the next item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item on the agenda is item 5.5, 2022-250 RZ at 22534 22548 and 22556 Royal Crescent for first and second reading of OCP amending bylaw number 7873, 2022, and second reading of zone amending bylaw number 7874, 2022. Staff are in attendance to present the application to council. Oh. My apologies. I read the wrong item. Sorry, the next item is item 5.4, 2021-579 RZ 23682 Dewdney Trunk Road for second reading of zone amending bylaw number 7826, 2022, and staff are in attendance to present the application to council.
Thank you. Please proceed, sir.
So the subject application at 23682 Dewdney Trunk Road is being considered for second reading for the zone amending bylaw 782622. The parcel and surrounding areas designated urban residential. The existing zoning is M1 service industrial, and the proposed zoning is RM1 low density townhouse residential on the majority of the site, and R2 single detached medium density residential, urban residential for the frontage along Dewdney Trunk Road. See that in a moment on the map. The existing site area is 1.1 acres or 0.46 hectares. As noted, it's to permit the application construction of 16 market strata townhouses and 2 single-family lots on Dewdney Trunk Road. This is the parcel, it's a very long, narrow parcel with single-family homes to the east and an industrial large building to the west. It's the urban residential designation covering the whole area, including the single-family area, the subject lot, and the industrial building to the west. And this is the ortho photo just showing the built environment of the single-family subdivision to the east and the lot, and then the large warehouse building to the west. So the proposed application, as noted, will be to allow for the future construction of 16 market strata townhouses and 2 single-family lots facing Dewdney Trunk Road. The townhouses are configured as 3-bedroom units with all having double-car garages, side-by-side garages. Basically, 3 lots are being created. The large townhouse lot is noted in the 2 single-family lots to the north facing Dewdney Trunk Road. There are 37 off-street parking spaces proposed for the townhouse portion of the development, and that meets the requirements of the parking bylaw. And long-term bicycle storage will be provided in each of the garages, individual units. This application is consistent with the urban residential designation in the OCP. And should the application proceed to adoption, the $7,400 per unit townhouse rate and $9,200 per single family rate for the community many contributions will be payable for a total of $136,800. There'd be also, this application proceeds to completion, consideration of a variance to vary the lot width requirement for the RM1 zone from 27 meters to 24.6 meters, or about 80 feet. Just a very long, skinny lot. It meets the size quite handily, but it's a little too narrow. And the applicant's being quite creative in fitting these townhouses on this narrow lot. And if the application proceeds, there'll be a future council report on this variance. And now this is the application here, just showing the different segments of it with there's 2 5-unit buildings and a 6-unit building. So the first is block C, the 6-unit building, and then the 2 5-unit buildings to the south. Most northerly is on the left, and then and that's a lane to the north for 6 units, and then the next section down for 5 units, then the next section down for 5 more units, having to be split up a little inconveniently because of the long nature of the lot. This is elevation. These are elevations of the project. First, I'll just start at the north. So the north is basically the side facing a lane. That's why there's a little street lamp there. So that on the far right side of the picture is the north elevation of the townhouse, and then the south elevation of the southern block of the townhouses, and a cross section. Now, starting on the front, there's front doors and basically garages facing the internal driveway, presenting a typical townhouse approach from a driveway, and then to the rear, basically a rear yard with private outdoor amenity areas for each unit as required under the bylaw. And then middle one, jumping around a little bit, is just a outline of all the 3 blocks on the site. Here's a perspective that shows actually a lot better. Just showing the townhouse units there facing, look, this is looking from the northwest, just towards the development, going down the driveway, and the 2 5 units and the 6 unit block. And then a view here, perspective from the backs of the units. And so the recommendations are that the application proceed with the normal rezoning servicing agreement and restrictive covenant, and provision of security is required, road dedication 119th Avenue, a geotechnical covenant for the geotechnical report that addresses the site for the proposed development, a protection of the visitor parking through a covenant, and a stormwater management covenant. And just again, a little more confirmation, although a site disclosure statement has been filed, just reconfirmation that there's not a contamination on this site, given that the industrial building to the west. And also confirmation that the professional engineer of record confirmed that there's no underground fuel storage tanks on the property. And if there are, that would have to be undertaken, removed, and there may be a stage 1 environmental site investigation required. And there'd be a voluntary contribution if the application proceeds to completion of $136,800 or such rate is applicable, adoption of the bylaw. Mr. Chair, committee.
Thank you for the presentation. May I call for a motion to move it forward? Mayor Rumi, followed by Councillor Youssef. Those for it? Oh, sorry, question you're asking. You are being too fast about it. Okay. Councillor Youssef, followed by Mayor Rumi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to staff for the presentation and the report. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, what uses are available to properties zoned M1? Ultimately, I'm trying to find out what businesses can function in this current zoning.
On that M1 zoning, light industrial is the main permitted use. Warehousing is a second major permitted use. There are also accessory uses of restaurant and a couple of that I can't recall offhand.
So a restaurant can be in an M1 zone.
In the M1 accessory to the industrial use. There's some detailed language about that. And also a caretaker suite.
Sorry, what was the last?
A caretaker suite.
Caretaker suite. Thank you.
Accessory to the industrial use.
Thank you for that. And through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, when we're looking at this particular property and we're considering what's mostly needed in the region and in Maple Ridge, would staff say that while there's definitely a need for housing in Maple Ridge specifically, do we need more housing, or would it be more prudent to at least retain these properties as industrial? Kind of asking staff to comment.
Sure, Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Youssef. Well, it's an interesting question because it is designated in a higher level plan as residential as the whole area, but the current zoning is the M1 service commercial. There's also the lot further to the west, the larger lot with the warehouse, which is staying as far as we know for the time being, is M2 zoning. It's a larger, more functional lot. This lot, possibly due to its narrow nature, is not being developed in the foreseeable past or the past as industrial. It's just alder trees and deciduous trees. And that's partly because of the very narrow configuration of the lot. It makes it quite difficult to develop. And we had a number of inquiries on this and for quite a number of uses, and they just didn't work out. And I think that's what's led this current owner and applicant to proceed with the residential rezoning that's allowed in the OCP.
Thank you for that. And that actually answered one of my questions as to the adjacent property, the property immediately to the west, if there been any discussion or indication from that owner whether they'll be following suit and rezoning to residential or whether they'll stay with the current zoning of M1. Lastly, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, on the variance that's being requested when we're requiring the lot width to go from 27 to 24.6 meters, would staff say that that's a significant decrease to the lot size width, more importantly?
Mr. Chair, through to Councillor Youssef, I would say it's not significant. It's it's under 3 meters, and they'd be able to fit a design that has the required driveway and outdoor private amenity space within that. I think they've just managed to fit it. So,
Thank you. Thank you for those were my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any more questions? Mayor Rumi?
Thank you very much, Chair, and through you to staff. I do have a question, and I'm starting to see this on other applications. Long-term bike storage provided in the garage. Is that a catch-all phrase, or is the garage actually bigger to accommodate bikes?
I would have to say that it's probably a fairly standard phrase, although we're looking more closely than, particularly when applicants are looking for variances, we're starting to look more closely at whether the bicycles can be included in the garage. And I think one thing that we've started discussing and some other municipalities do is actually have a template of standard vehicle and a bicycle and garbage containers in their garage to see that it works.
Yeah, because I think that's important, especially with the size of cars today and the size of the parking, and the fact that not a lot of people actually use their garages for parking. I just want to make sure that there is going to be room for actual bike storage. If these are 3-bedroom condos, so likely families will be there. So we want to make sure there is adequate parking for bike storage. And then the follow-up to this is there any room for, you have your bicycles, what about bike paths around the building or access in bike lanes around that area there?
Your worship, there would be, this has access to a lane at the north and 117th Avenue to the south. So I think it has quite onto local roads. I think it has quite good access to local safe roads for riding a bike at a certain distance. Obviously, as you go further, the bike network is not completed. And there's in the strategic transportation plan, there's a bike network planned and being built bit by bit. But it's not inherently bike friendly or bike hazardous location, I'd say, just given Dooney Trunk Road to the north and the local roads to the south.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I can just expand a bit on that, just given the strategic transportation part of it. And so the recently endorsed strategic transportation plan has a neighborhood bikeway that runs through this neighborhood. And so that's one that's going to help us get those bike facilities from Maple Meadow Station all the way out to 240th Street. And so it's positioned well to be along that alignment, and it'll get you a safe route into town. And the idea with that is within the next 5 years to have that constructed out. And that was one of the OKRs that came to council for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Round 2, I will say. Any more questions? Okay. In the absence of questions, I'll now call the question. Those in support, should please raise their hands. Okay, 4 against 1. The motion is carried. Thank you. Madam Clerk, may I have the next item on the agenda, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item is item 5.5, 2022-250 RZ at 22534, 22548, and 22556 Royal Crescent for first and second reading of official community plan amending bylaw number 7873, 2022, and second reading of zone amending bylaw number 7874, 2022. Staff are in attendance to present the application to council.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Please proceed. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This presentation is for the rezoning application 2022-250-RZ for 3 properties on Royal Crescent, requesting council to grant first and second reading to the OCP amendment bylaw 7873-2022, as well as second reading to the zoning amendment bylaw 7874-2022. The purpose of this application is to rezone the property from RS1 single detached residential to RM2 medium density apartment residential, as well as redesignating the properties from ground-oriented multifamily to low-rise apartment in order to allow the construction of a 6-story rental building for BC Housing for the low to moderate income seniors. The subject sites include 3 properties that are located to the south of Royal Crescent that are currently used as supportive housing for BC Housing. The properties are relatively flat with the exception of the southeastern portion of the property that has a slope of greater than 15% and would be subject to the natural features development permit. The property also include around 24 mature trees that are mostly going to be removed and replaced as part of this development application. Given that the properties and the site is located within 800 meters of the Lougheed control access area of Lougheed Highway, final approval and adoption of this rezoning application will be subject to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure approval. The subject site is currently located within the town center area plan south of Lougheed Precinct and is currently designated ground-oriented multifamily that allows low to medium density ground-oriented form of development such as row houses, townhouses, fourplexes, and courtyard housing. However, to allow the construction of a 6-story apartment building redesignation to low-rise apartment consistent with the designation of the properties to the north and southwest will be required. As you see on the ortho photo, the property, with the exception of the southeastern portion that is really steep slope and the forested area, the rest of the property has been developed. And this site is surrounded by low to medium density apartment residential to the north, east, and west, as well as single family development to the south. So this is a picture of the proposed 6-story apartment building in the context of the existing neighborhood. The proposed building will include 98 rental unit, 93 1-bedroom, and 5 2-bedroom unit. There will be a mix of accessible and adaptable unit due to the future user of this building, which will be all seniors. I have to note that there is an existing active application to the north of this property to kind of redevelop the existing 2-story apartment in the form of a 6-story apartment residential. This is the site plan of the subject project. The proposed development site will include significant landscaping and green space in the front yard along Royal Crescent to improve the public realm as well as residents' access to landscape area, gardening, and outdoor open spaces. The subject site will also include the surface parking as well as outdoor spaces to the south of the subject proposed building. As part of this development application, the applicant is requesting a slight reduction to the front setback of 0.85 in order to accommodate the required road dedication along Royal Crescent. In addition to a reduced setback of the interior side setback from the west, from 7.5 meter to 4 meter in order to accommodate the required surface parking, as well as reducing the disturbance and interaction into the steep slope to the south. This is the section of the proposed building indicating 6-story of the building plus 1 level of underground parking. Due to the siting restriction and the cost, the applicant is requesting reduction of the off-street parking from 167 parking to 74 off-street parking, given the lower demand to the parking for the independent senior living development. From the 74 off-street parking, 8 will be accessible, 6 would be small car parking, and 6 will be provided for visitors. All parking, in addition to 50% of the visitor parking, will have access to level 2 charging station. In addition, the applicant is also providing 10 long-term bicycle parking and 5 short-term bicycle parking and a scooter storage room for the residents. This is the northern elevation incorporating detailed architectural articulation as well as color scheme and landscaping will definitely introduce a significant improvement to the existing use of the property and the neighborhood. And this is the northwest view showing the surface parking as well as the outdoor amenity area to the south of the building. The applicant is proposing a small outdoor amenity area that will be overlooking the steep slope to the south of the property for the use of the residents. And this is the bird view of the proposed building, showing the building, the surface parking to the south, as well as their outdoor amenity area. In total, the applicant is proposing 320 square meters of outdoor spaces. The part of them is on the rooftop, and the remaining 2 other areas are adjacent to the surface parking. The full recommendation has been provided in the report, but in general, we are requesting council to grant first and second reading to the OCP amendment bylaw and not requiring any further public consultation in addition to the posting of the OCP amendment on the website as well as public hearing. Also requesting council to grant second reading to the zoning amendment bylaw and forwarding this application to the public hearing. There is a list of requirements that the applicant will be required to meet prior to proceeding this application to final adoption. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I have a motion to move this application forward? Mayor Rumi, followed by Councillor Duik. Question time. Councillor Tan, followed by Mayor Rumi, and then Councillor Sheila. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to staff, through you. I've just got a few, always nice to see seniors housing. I've just got a few questions about sort of increasing the, sort of like allowing for some more capacity in decision making and just sort of making it, facilitating this more. I saw that there were only 5 units of 2-bedroom, and I understand from the housing needs assessment report that there's interest from seniors for 2 bedrooms. I understand, I'm just reading this and it says that there was an interest in detached garden suites or sort of rancher style housing, but I understand that the developer community said, well, that's a little bit harder for us. So I'm looking at this and seeing that it's mostly single bedroom. I'm just trying to figure out what can we do to help the developer create more 2 bedrooms here. I'm seeing that it's 6 stories. Can we, facilitate 8 stories if they'll give us more 2 bedroom? I understand that there's a parking variance for 74 stalls. I did some quick math looking at the new proposed parking bylaw, and I saw that that would bring the requirement down to 68 stalls. I mean, what can we do here to make it easier for the developer to put into more 2 bedrooms for us?
True, Mr. Chair. On a typical rezoning application, we always remind and request the applicant to provide at least 10% of 3-bedroom and a more larger family size. However, this is a BC housing project, and the unit mix has been determined by the needs that the BC housing is aware of. If I think the applicant has been online and they might be able to provide some suggestion on or justification of why this is the proposed unit mix.
Thank you. Is the applicant looking to speak to that?
Through the chairman, my name is Stephen. I'm the architect for the project. BC Housing, I don't know why there's a lot of feedback. Are you guys hearing that?
We hear you fine.
Okay, wonderful. BC Housing basically has standards for seniors housing, and it's based on their research and what their community needs are. If there's a desire by council to introduce more 2-bedrooms, I can certainly speak to those, as well as the nonprofit society that they are partnering with.
Thank you for that. I think, yes, I just speaking for myself, I'd like to see that just because our housing needs assessment indicates that seniors are looking for more 2-bedroom apartments. I mean, I think just speaking for myself, I would be interested in hearing what the applicant or BC Housing needs from the municipality in order to achieve that. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, sir.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and through the chair to staff. Recognizing that this is supposed to be seniors housing, I don't want to assume, so I'm just going to ask, is there sufficient room in the hallways and the apartments themselves to accommodate things like scooters and accessibility issues?
Mr. Chair, we have been looking at the design prior to proceeding this application to advisory design panel to make sure that it meets all the basic building code requirement for the accessibility. However, following our review as well as the architects making sure that all those requirements have been reflected at the time of building permit, there will be a further detailed review by our building department just to make sure that all the accessibility issues has been reflected on the drawing. From the description of the project, all the units will be adaptable as well as accessible, and there are certain requirements and the dimensions that will be required to be met for this type of unit. So I'm assuming that all those dimensions have been checked and incorporated into the design drawing, and it will be reviewed at the time of our building permit application as well.
Thank you. I think we need to make sure, like while we talk about bicycle storage for regular apartments, we need to consider scooter storage. And where they can put them, because in a lot of places, scooters are way wider than a bicycle. So we need to make sure that they have a place to store it that makes sense. So we'll be looking to the future to see how that all comes out. Thank you.
Sorry, one more thing is that there is a common scooter storage room in the main floor of the building, 26 square meters, that is allocated for all the residents. However, I don't believe that there is a specific storage area. There might be in the unit for the residents to bring their scooter, but there would be that common area for them.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
No worries.
That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Sheila.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering if we have any information available on, I understand it's a BC housing project. I'm not totally clear on how rents will be determined, if they're geared to income or if there's specific amounts. And I'm just wondering if we have any information on that at this point.
Mr. Chair, if that's okay, I wanted to defer this to the BC housing representatives that are attending online.
Again, I think what I will ask is Sarah Atkinson, who I believe is with us today, to answer that question. Sarah?
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. So the project is proposed to be funded under the Community Housing Fund, which requires the rents 20% at shelter rate, 50% at rent geared to income, and 30% at affordable market.
Thank you much. Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Round two. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to clarify just my comments about the 2 bedrooms. I'm not necessarily as concerned about the 3 bedrooms. I'm really more concerned about the 2 bedrooms here because I'm just my understanding the need from the community in terms of downsizing and having the grandkids stay with them. So I understand from what the applicant said previously that there was some math being done by BC Housing in terms of the needs of that they had assessed for a community. I just wanted to say that I would love to see that that work. If that work and that sort of that calculation that BC Housing did, if those steps could come back to council so that we could review them, that would be extremely helpful. And just want to say that. And in terms of the rent, thank you for that explanation, Ms. Atkinson, about the calculation for the CHF funding. I would be interested to hear what we could do to further increase the subsidy further decrease the rent that these seniors will be charged for this building. And again, what else? If the developer requires any assistance from the municipality in terms of upfront work for pre-zoning, to let us know on the front. So those 2 questions around unit size and rents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any more?
Yeah, through the chair. So you can, the shelter rates are set at, I think shelter for 1 bedroom right now is 550. It just got increased this year, sorry. Rent geared to income is 30% of a person's income. And then affordable seniors market would be set, you know, at a rent for the region. So you can make the project more affordable by, you know, reducing or eliminating DCCs on affordable housing projects and waiving fees and things like that are ways that municipalities often participate in the application. It also means that the project gets scored better on the community housing funding because we haven't been approved for it. So we're applying, the deadline is November 17th, and this project is going forward into the RFP for the CHF.
Thank you for that, Ms. Atkinson. I think that sort of information is useful, and I think that I think staff would be happy to work with you and bring that back to us, so different options for making that this project more appealing to CHF funding. And I understand that those shelter rates and the other rates are set at a standard. I'm just curious about the percentage shift, about whether we can move more of the units from that affordable number down to the I know there's a second tier and then down to the shelter rates. So just sort of moving more of those units down to the sort of lower rent front. And your comments are well taken about the DCCs and the CACs. And I'm sure I think their staff can work look at options for density bonusing or parking or whatever else we can pull off our toolbox. So I'm looking forward to hearing that come back from staff. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Through Madam Chair, just Mr. Chair, the City of Maple Ridge has a lower DCC for this type of affordable rental project, which is significantly lower than similar type of project, but we will definitely bring back a report regarding what would be the other alternatives to help this project, more affordability.
Thank you. Any more questions? Seeing none, I will call the question now. Those for us to move this forward is unanimously carried. Thank you. And thank you very much for that wonderful presentation and fielding up questions. Madam Clerk, may we have the next item on the agenda, please?
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 5.6, 2018-489, development variance permit at 20278 and 20292 Patterson Avenue. Staff are in attendance to present the item to council.
Who is making the presentation?
Supposed to be there.
Would that be item, Mr. Chair?
Please go ahead.
Above noted application on Patterson Avenues for a development variance permit. The designation is medium density multifamily, RS1 single detached residential is a current zoning. It's proposed to be rezoned to RM2 medium density apartment residential. The site area is 0.91 acres, and the purpose is to rezone the subject properties. Actually, it's already being rezoned. It's to consider a development permit application for these properties with an apartment building of 88 units and 2 levels underground parking. This is a subject property here, located at the intersection of Patterson Avenue and 203rd Street. Subject property on the ortho photo showing the single family area around. Development proposal is for development permit and development variance permit, conjunction with a rezoning application that's to be considered at council next Tuesday, October 24th. Development application consists of 88 1- and 2-bedroom units ranging from approximately 500 square feet to 870 square feet. The proposed development and the rezoning that's going forward next week is in compliance with the official community plan designation. The requested variances to the Maple Ridge zoning bylaw are as follows: to reduce the front yard setback from 203rd Street from 7.5 meters to 4.0 meters, and for the building face, and to 2.75 meters for the roof overhang on 203rd Street. And to reduce the exterior side yard setback to Patterson Avenue from 7.5 meters to 4 meters for the building face and 2.75 meters for the roof overhang, the same type of setback. Relaxations proposed on both road frontages. So this is the site showing 203rd to the bottom of the screen. To the north is actually facing to the right, and Patterson Avenue to the north is of course to the right. And the variances, as noted, are to reduce the setback to 203rd Avenue and to Patterson, or 203rd Street and Patterson Avenue. And report recommendation is that the corporate office would be authorized to sign and seal PVP 2018-489 DVP respecting the property located at 20278 and 20292 Patterson Avenue. And further, the corporate officer be authorized to sign and seal development permit 2018-489 DP respecting the property at Patterson Avenue. Mr. Chair and committee.
Thank you, sir. May I have a motion to move this forward? Councillor Dewick, followed by Councillor Youssef. Okay, question time. Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to staff for the presentation and report. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. With the 88 units, we're approximately looking at a little over 100 vehicles going on to Patterson Avenue. What is the traffic plan to accommodate those vehicles? And will there be any changes that will be made to the intersection around 203rd to accommodate the extra volume?
With regards to traffic, I'll defer to the Director of Engineering on that.
Thank you. And so just thinking back, so this application, when it went through the rezoning process, did have a traffic impact assessment complete. And as part of that, there weren't any immediate items identified on 203rd or Patterson. It did flag concerns with congestion on Lougheed Highway, the intersection on 203rd Lougheed Highway, but we consider that outside the realm of this application and more of a broader scale issue for the city of Maple Ridge.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was my question.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Seeing none, I call the question now. Those in support? The motion is unanimously carried. And thank you very much for stepping up. Madam Clerk, take us to the next item on the agenda, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item on the agenda is item 8.1, consolidated fees and charges amending bylaw for recreation service fees. Staff are in attendance to present the application to council.
Thank you, ma'am. Please proceed, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Council. Today I'll be talking to you about the recreation service fee update and the process involved to come up with our recommended rates and some background behind the policies that actually generate these values. So on an annual basis, recreation services staff undertake a review, a regional assessment of the current fees for rental rates as well as admission rates for recreation services. This work is guided by the Parks, Recreation and Culture fees and charges policy, which in some instances is quite prescriptive as to the how the rates are actually calculated. Through the analysis and the benchmarking, we've identified the proposed rates, which break down to three categories. The first of which is to increase multi-use room rates, commercial rates, and park shelters by 5%. Retaining the current rates for the memberships and the admissions and rentals associated here. I will note that the sport user fee annual contribution as well as miscellaneous fees are being held as a result of council decision back from 2019. So there is some history there as well. But these rates are all proposed to remain the same. Additionally, pardon me, we're looking to increase the remainder of fees by 2%. And then introducing a multi-year schedule for both private and non-residential rentals. The purpose of that inclusion is to allow for future year rental bookings and securing a rate in advance for our customers and improving customer service. So I should mention that all of the proposed rates and the process were actually reviewed with the Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee prior to coming forward to council. The group did support these rate increases, and the fees will be reviewed on a continued annual basis as part of the broader objective and key result, which was brought forward last week to council for consideration. Now, in terms of next steps, as this bylaw moves forward to council and is adopted, the new rates will take effect at the beginning of January. So they do not take immediate effect, but actually are delayed until January. All of these fees actually form part of the consolidated fees and charges bylaw, which you will see updates to over the course of the next several months as well. And that really concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, sir. Get a motion. Moved by Councillor Yusuf, followed by Mayor Rumi. Thank you. Question time. Okay, Councillor Dewey, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we talked about residents and non-residents. So currently, if somebody's using the swimming pool, is there a difference if you're a resident of Maple Ridge versus not?
From an admissions perspective, there is not.
There is not. Is that something we're going to look into in the future? And there's a reason for my question, but I'll save it till next week.
The answer is yes.
Okay, good. I don't need to ask it then. Thank you.
You're welcome. You know, one other thing, just to elaborate on Mr. Olivieri's presentation, we also recognize that it's important moving forward that we have one fees and charges bylaw that takes into account all of the fees and charges organizationally. So we are moving in that direction. There are some pieces that we needed to move on in advance of that discussion, but please know moving forward, there will be one consolidated bylaw with all of the subsequent fees and charges attached to it rather than us coming at council numerous times throughout the year or during business planning. So just a heads up on that too. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Olivieri, could you please spell out for me which fees will not be changing?
Yes. If we can, it's not a problem. So
I know you had that slide on it.
So the current one-year membership rate will not be changing. Rental fees for the gymnasium will not be changing, as well as any youth or senior or nonprofit fees across the board. And then the sport field user annual contribution fees or miscellaneous fees, which are located at the end of the attached bylaw.
Okay. And so that means if I would go to the pool or I go to the fitness center, that would be an increase of, was it 2%?
That's correct.
Okay. And how does that, I noticed that you were looking at different municipalities, and how does that compare to those municipalities you pointed out?
So it's generally in line. What we see across the region is an inflationary increase. What we're actually seeing is an increase to that inflationary value. So as we're seeing over the past couple of years, it's going from 2% to 3%. And so as we evaluate in the coming years, we are going to have to consider how our inflationary increase factors in as well, and whether we need to align with those increases.
Okay, thank you for that. And just to make sure I understand, I think I remember from previous conversations that we had said that some fees, some PRC fees are actually subsidized so that the user fees don't fully cover the cost of operation. Can you sort of help me understand that?
Through the chair, that's a very great point. There are a number of subsidy programs that actually promote the accessibility to our recreation services. There's a whole host from depending on household incomes, as well as third-party funding through Jumpstart and other associations. Recreation access is always, there's options for accessing, even if cost is a barrier. If there's specific detail, then I'm sure Mr. LeBon can elaborate if there's a program that you're focused on or have specific questions about.
Thank you. I'm just trying to understand, just sort of to have a more sort of holistic view. I understand that those subsidy programs, thank you. And I remember, I think I might have remembered wrongly that something like pool fees, for example, the cost of operation per user was actually higher than the cost that I would pay to get into the pool. Is that correct?
Thank you. Through the chair. Yes, they are. The Leisure Center does have an amount that taxation helps fund. So it is subsidized through property taxes. So if our admission fees were required to make it a break even, it wouldn't be very accessible for folks. So
right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any more questions? Last call. Any more questions? Okay, I call the question now for vote. It's unanimously carried. Thank you very much. Again, Madam Clerk, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item on the agenda is item 10.1, intermunicipal business license bylaw number 7915-2023 and intermunicipal business license agreement bylaw number 7971-2023. Staff are in attendance to present the application to council.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. You have the stage, please. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Mayor and Council. So I'm here today to talk about the IMBL or what's known as the mobile license. So prior to 2012, the province, UBCM and local government collaborated to implement an intermunicipal bylaw, a business license bylaw or mobile license to simplify licensing processes for the trade contractors working across multiple jurisdictions throughout BC. The legislation was already in the community charter, but no municipality had at that time taken the initiative to move forward on this project before. So in October 2012, City of Maple Ridge proceeded with an intermunicipal business license bylaw, thus enabling the city to participate in a one-year intermunicipal business license pilot program. The pilot program was developed in partnership with local government and the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation to assist and reduce red tape for contractors and trades operating within the construction industry. And these include professionals like surveyors and engineers. So the definition of an intermunicipal business means a trades contractor or other professional related to the construction industry or a contractor that performs maintenance or repair of land and buildings from other than their premise. In January 2013, the City of Maple Ridge joined a steering committee in partnership with the province of BC, which included 9 Fraser Valley municipalities. From there, we created the Fraser Valley Intermunicipal Business License Pilot Program that included Abbotsford, Chilliwack, Hope, the 2 Langleys, Maple Ridge, Mission, Pitt Meadows, and Surrey. Between October 2013 and December 2015, the committee reviewed the program and extended it to the end of 2015. So in November 2015, the City of Delta and the District of Kent joined the Fraser Valley IMBL program, bringing that to 11 participants. From there, we developed a revenue sharing scheme where the home municipality, which in the case of the Fraser Valley program is the City of Surrey, which retains 90% of the yearly revenue and redistributes the remainder evenly to other participating municipalities. And in November 2015, the steering committee recommended that local governments make the program permanent. So a little bit about the program. So it's for non-resident trade contractors that don't live or have their business in Maple Ridge. And it's to allow these contractors to purchase a intermunicipal license for $250 in their home municipality, along with their regular business license for their city. And that IMBL license allows them to work in all municipalities within their group. In October 2019, the village of Harrison Hot Springs and the city of Merritt joined the Fraser Valley IMBL program. So then we became 13 cities in our group, and that is the current map. So here's a timeline from 2012 to present day. And where we are now is we would like to repeal the current bylaw and introduce a new bylaw. And we do that so that all municipalities are putting forward the same bylaw. And we are now removing the city of Merritt due to its geographical location. And we did some housekeeping in that bylaw. We'd also like to introduce an intermunicipal business license agreement bylaw to administer the commitment between participating municipalities, much like the TNS or ride hailing bylaw that we have now. So there are several programs operating through the province right now. There are actually 17 mobile business license partnerships between 104 municipalities or communities in British Columbia. And any questions?
Thank you for the presentation. I call for a motion first of all to take this forward. Councillor Youssef, followed by Mayor Rumi. Questions? Go ahead, Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to staff for the presentation. Very interested in this. Is there a way for us to join the Tri-Cities, the North Shore, Metro West IMBL programs to facilitate that business for contractors?
There is, and if I can bring up my business license inspector coordinator, sorry, not inspector, business license coordinator, Sean Kane, and she's going to talk about how that could happen, or if it can.
Unexpected, but okay. So through the chair, there are multiple intermunicipal business license programs, as Michelle explained. The Tri-Cities is not one that is necessarily supported by the province, like the Fraser Valley program is. We have had discussions about approaching them, but there are differences in the way we run and the way they run. So based on our definition, where we speak to contractors and people in the professional engineering architects capacity, they don't necessarily focus on that. They can say anyone that is a mobile business can move freely. So we have some restrictions. They may not. So there's differences, but certainly the committee is open to discussion.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I mean, I'm just putting myself in the sort of the shoes of a contractor, and I would imagine that Maple Ridge would be a more attractive place to do business and provide services, and so there's that freedom of movement across the Fraser Valley and Metro Vancouver. So I'm just curious what we can do. I understand there are differences in programs of what we can do on our end if it's possible to make that happen.
So through the chair, the committee is so the committee is made up of the municipalities that you see on screen. And there is also currently the city of Surrey and the city of Delta also participate in one of the other schemes, which is the Metro Vancouver. So they, in a sense, double dip in both programs. So there's some crossover there to start with, and they are a good resource to have those discussions, to talk about how we can expand. So once in a while, we revisit that at the committee, how we can expand. Can we expand geographically? Can we expand based on whatever the business type is? So I think there are opportunities. That is something that does come back to the table, but what the committee is focused on right now, and that the province is supporting, is looking at businesses that are not within our catchment, so outside of the program, and if there is a way we can make life easier for them by facilitating an option of issuing them an IMBL license. So currently we're in the process of submitting data sets that the province is going to run the analysis on, financial, what type of contractors they are, where they're coming from, what the movement looks like around the Lower Mainland. And then at that point, we'll have some data to base some decisions on. So that's currently the focus, is how can we expand that? But that doesn't mean that there's not other options that we revisit from time to time.
Fair enough. I'll take your expert opinion on that. And just a question on just specific one. I'm just on the question of excluding Merritt. I understand geographically they're quite a bit further. Is there sort of a requirement to do that? I'm just thinking about if there's one contractor, who also does business in Merritt, or just a small number of contractors who do business across the municipalities. So unless there's a strong reason for excluding Merritt, I may not want to do that.
There is an additional reason. So my understanding is when Merritt were part of the program, they only sold 2 licenses across the time frame. So I believe that
based on numbers, that wasn't a problem. Merit have also confirmed that they are happy to leave the program. So I guess that they weren't benefiting from it. And also when we did the initial adoption, there was some slight inconsistencies across the bylaws between our participating municipalities, and this will now resolve that because we're doing the repeal and replace.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Youssef.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to staff for the presentation and clarifications thus far. Building on what Councillor Tan was asking about, inquiring about, have we consulted with the Chamber of Commerce and their members to see whether they are comfortable with the current program or whether they'd like to have the municipality looking at joining the Tri-Cities or other programs that would be more conducive to their members doing business in the Lower Mainland? Is there any consultation possibly in the past or ongoing with the Chamber of Commerce is what the question boils down to.
Through the chair, my understanding is that back when the program came into play, the chambers were involved at that point, gave their support. And then when the program came in, we used them as a mechanism to get the message out there. So they've been supportive and we've used them along the way. I don't think that there's anything that, in my opinion, that has been problematic with our local chamber, but certainly we're open to, having a conversation about them about any way we can support them or they can support us.
Thank you for that. And that was my hope, that there would be that ongoing consultation and dialogue with the chamber to ensure that their input is considered. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Youssef. And I would actually echo what he said. After all, we say that the more we are together, the merrier we shall be, happier we shall be, and the more the merrier. So I echo what he said, and we recommend that we speak to those two bodies, BIA and the Chambers of Commerce, to see and make sure that we carry as many people as we can along. And thank you very much for the wonderful presentation, both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, I call for the questions now. Those who are in support should raise their hand. I would say it's unanimously carried. Thank you very much. Lastly, I'll ask you, Madam Clerk, please take us to the next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item on the agenda is item 10, the Community Forum. Participants in the Community Forum are reminded that there should be no discussion of public hearing bylaws which have not yet reached conclusion. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak to council. A second opportunity may be provided once all speakers in the queue have had an opportunity to speak. The total time allotted for Community Forum is 15 minutes. If you wish to inquire about additional opportunities to address council, please contact the corporate officer. For members of the public who would like to speak during Community Forum, clearly state your name and city of residence before beginning your comments. If you are participating electronically, please use the raise hand icon, and when you are called upon, please turn on your camera. If you're attending the meeting in person, please come forward to the podium when the chair invites speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much again. And I'll ask from the chambers here, do we have anybody intending to speak to us? Second and last call, any member of the audience wanting to speak to us in the chambers? And what about online?
No, Mr. Chair, there are no speakers online.
Thank you very much. And in seeing none, I would like to ask for the next item on the agenda, I just suppose is
adjournment.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank each and every one of you for your attention. And I wish to say that this meeting remains adjourned. Thank you very much.